My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm 63 years old. For 4 decades, I lived in the shadow of my perfect dead sister Emma. Every Sunday, my parents visited her grave, weeping as if she'd died yesterday. But last year, while cleaning out my mother's house after her funeral, I discovered something that destroyed everything I believed about my family. Emma never existed. Not the way we thought. And the truth will break your heart. Emma Rose Mitchell supposedly died in 1977, at age 7, in a car accident. I was born 2 years later, the rainbow baby meant to heal my parents' broken hearts. But I never brought healing. How could I? Emma was perfect. Golden curls, bright blue eyes, straight A's. According to my parents, Emma would have been a doctor, a pianist, a Nobel Prize winner. I was just average Sarah. My childhood was a shrine to Emma. Her bedroom remained untouched: pink wallpaper, canopy bed, toys she'd never again play with. Photos of Emma covered every surface. Emma at Christmas, Emma at the beach, Emma blowing out birthday candles. Every year on Emma's birthday, December 15th, our house became a funeral home. Mom would bake Emma's favorite chocolate cake. Dad would sit staring at her photos, crying, and I would wonder why I wasn't enough to make them happy. When I turned 7, the age Emma died, I thought maybe now I'd be special too. Instead, Mom spent my entire birthday sobbing because I'd outlived my sister. I grew up believing I had a guardian angel sister watching over me. I even talked to her sometimes. Emma, why do Mom and Dad love you more than me? What did I do wrong? As I got older, things started feeling wrong. Why were there so many photos of Emma? In the 1970s, cameras used expensive film. People didn't take hundreds of pictures of one child. And Emma was always alone in the photos. Never with friends, never at school events, never with family. For a child who supposedly lived 7 years, she seemed remarkably isolated. When I was 20, I tried researching Emma's accident. I spent hours at the library, searching newspaper archives from 1977. Fatal car accidents involving children always make headlines, but I found nothing. No Emma Mitchell, no accident, no obituary. When I asked my parents for details, they became strange. Where did the accident happen? Highway 35, Dad said quickly. Who was the drunk driver? They never caught him, Mom whispered. That night, I heard them arguing something they never did. She's asking too many questions, Dad hissed. We can't tell her the truth, Mom replied. Not after all these years. The truth. What truth? Emma died in a car accident. What else was there to know? In my 30s, I hired a private investigator to find closure. I wanted to visit where Emma died, maybe find the driver responsible. What he found shattered everything. There was no record of Emma Rose Mitchell anywhere. No birth certificate, no social security number, no school records. According to every database, Emma had never existed. Next, I investigated the cemetery. Emma's grave was beautiful, expensive white marble reading Emma Rose Mitchell, beloved daughter. 1970, 1977. But when I asked for burial records, the manager became uncomfortable. I can't give you information about that grave, he said. There are complications. Complications. What complications could there be with a child's grave? That's when I learned something terrifying. Emma's grave had been purchased in 1975, 2 years before she supposedly died. How do you buy a grave for someone who's still alive? I found Mrs. Henderson, our old neighbor, now 84. When I mentioned Emma, she looked confused. Oh honey, your parents never got over losing that baby, I asked. Emma was 7 when she died. 7. Mrs. Henderson shook her head. No, dear. Emma was stillborn. She never made it past birth. Your mother carried her for 7 months before losing her. The world stopped spinning. Mrs. Henderson, that's impossible. Emma lived until she was 7. She died in a car accident. Car accident? No. Emma was born sleeping in 1975. Your poor mother had episodes afterward talking about Emma like she was still alive, buying her clothes, having birthday parties with empty chairs. She leaned closer. That's why your family moved away. The doctor said your mother needed help separating her fantasies from reality. If Emma was stillborn, where did all those photos come from? I searched through Mom's belongings until I found a Christmas card from 1976, signed the Morrison family, with a photo of a beautiful little girl who looked exactly like Emma. The girl's name was Emily Morrison. She was 6 years old in the photo. I tracked down the Morrison family. What I learned made me sick. Emily Morrison had died in a car accident in 1977. She was 7 years old. When I called Emily's mother, now 84, she remembered my mom. Margaret stopped calling after Emily died, she said. I always wondered why. I gave her Emily's photos at the funeral. She said she wanted to remember Emily, since her own Emma would have been the same age. She took Emily's photos, Mrs. Morrison whispered when I explained. She told people Emily was her daughter. My parents hadn't just invented Emma's life, they'd stolen it from a real child who died. At 45, I finally confronted my parents. They were elderly, frail, but I needed the truth. I laid everything out, the missing records, the purchased grave, the stolen photos. Dad broke first, sobbing like I'd never seen. We never meant for it to go this far, he cried. After we lost Emma, our real Emma, stillborn at 7 months, your mother couldn't cope. She started imagining what Emma would have been like if she'd lived. When Emily Morrison died, and we went to her funeral, your mother saw those photos and she took Emily's story and gave it to our Emma. It made her feel like Emma had lived, even though she hadn't. Mom finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Emma felt more real to me than reality. I could see her growing up, hear her laugh, feel her hugs. How do you let go of something that feels that real? But when you were born, Dad continued, instead of helping your mother heal, it made the fantasy worse. Now Emma was the perfect child we'd lost, and you were. You were a reminder that Emma was gone. Armed with the truth about Emma being stillborn and the stolen photos, I returned to the cemetery with new questions. This time, I demanded answers from the manager. You said there were complications with Emma's grave. What kind of complications? The manager, clearly uncomfortable, finally opened up. Your parents have been visiting that grave for 40 years, but there's nothing buried there. It's an empty plot. My blood ran cold. What do you mean, empty? In 1975, your parents purchased the plot and headstone after losing a stillborn baby, but they never brought a body for burial. We assumed they were waiting for the right time, maybe when the grief wasn't so fresh. But they've been coming here for decades, bringing flowers, having conversations with the grave. I know, he said sadly. We didn't have the heart to tell them. They seemed to find such comfort here. Who were we to take that away? I stared at that beautiful marble headstone, Emma Rose Mitchell, beloved daughter, 1970 to 1977, and realized it was marking nothing but empty earth. Even Emma's final resting place was a lie. I needed to find where Emma's body actually was. If she was stillborn in 1975, there had to be hospital records. At St. Mary's Hospital, after hours of paperwork and proving my identity, I finally got access to the records from December 15, 1975, what my parents had always celebrated as Emma's birthday. The truth was written in clinical, heartless language: stillborn female infant, 7 months gestation. Parents, Thomas and Margaret Mitchell. Disposition, hospital cremation. No services requested. Emma had been cremated by the hospital. Her ashes were scattered in their memorial garden with dozens of other unnamed infants. There was no individual marker, no special place, just a small plaque reading in memory of the little ones. For 40 years, my parents had been visiting an empty grave, while Emma's real ashes rested in an unmarked garden 20 miles away. The financial records I found in Mom's house revealed the true cost of their grief. The elaborate grave marker, $8,000 in 1975, equivalent to $40,000 today. The perpetual care fees, $200 every month for 40 years. But that was just the beginning. I found receipts for thousands of dollars in toys bought for Emma. Every Christmas and birthday toys that were donated to charity after being displayed in her room for exactly one day. The pink bedroom shrine was redecorated every few years to age up with Emma. At 7, it was a little girl's room. At 10, they'd changed it to reflect a preteen's tastes. By what would have been Emma's 30th birthday, it had become a sophisticated woman's space, complete with career woman outfits hanging in the closet. My parents had literally furnished an entire imaginary life. When I was struggling to pay for college, they were buying graduation gifts for Emma's phantom high school ceremony. When I couldn't afford a wedding dress, they'd just purchased a $3,000 wedding dress. Emma would have loved that, hung unworn in her closet. The cruelest discovery, a college fund they'd been contributing to for Emma's education, that had grown to $150,000, money that could have changed my entire life. I started contacting people who'd known my family over the years. What I learned was that our entire social circle had been built around enabling my parents' delusion. Mrs. Patterson from our old church remembered my parents vividly. Every Sunday, your mother would update us on Emma's achievements. We all thought it was her way of keeping Emma's memory alive. When she talked about Emma's piano recitals or her straight A's, we just nodded along. But Emma was 7 when she died. How could she have years of achievements? Oh honey, your mother talked about Emma for decades. Last I heard, Emma would have been a pediatric surgeon by now if she'd lived. We just, we didn't know how to tell her to stop. I discovered my parents had created an entire fake timeline. They'd celebrated Emma's high school graduation, her college acceptance, her medical school achievements, all shared with unsuspecting friends who thought they were humoring grieving parents. Some people had tried to help. I found a letter from a family therapist, dated 1982, suggesting my parents needed professional help for complicated grief and dissociative episodes. My parents had never gone. The most devastating realization was how Emma's fantasy had shaped every relationship in our family. My grandparents, my aunts and uncles, they'd all been pulled into the lie. I called my Aunt Linda, Dad's sister, who'd moved across the country when I was young. I couldn't watch what your parents were doing to you, she admitted through tears. Every family gathering, you were compared to Emma. You'd bring home straight A's, and your mother would say Emma would have gotten a pluses. You'd play piano beautifully, and she'd talk about Emma's imaginary concert performances. Why didn't anyone stop them? We tried, Sarah. We really tried. But your mother would become hysterical if anyone suggested Emma wasn't real the way she remembered her, and your father. He was so broken after losing the baby that he went along with anything that kept your mother functional. The final straw was your 16th birthday. Your mother spent the entire party crying because it was also the day Emma would have gotten her driver's license. I watched you blow out your candles while she sobbed about the sweet 16 party Emma would have had. That's when I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. I had to choose between enabling your parents' delusion or protecting my own sanity. I chose to leave, and I've regretted abandoning you ever since. I found Dr. Harrison, the obstetrician who delivered Emma in 1975. At 89, Keith was retired but remembered my parents clearly. Your mother had what we now call complicated grief disorder, he explained. Losing a baby at 7 months is devastating. The baby is fully formed. You've felt movement, picked out names. But in 1975, we didn't have the psychological support systems we have today. I recommended grief counseling, but your parents disappeared from our care. The next thing I heard, they were telling people Emma had lived to age 7. I assumed it was temporary, a way to cope until they could accept reality. When you were born 2 years later, I hoped a living child would help them heal. Instead, it seemed to cement the fantasy. Now Emma became the perfect child they'd lost, and you became real, with all the imperfections that real children have. Armed with all the evidence, the empty grave, the hospital records, the financial devastation, I sat my aging parents down for one final conversation. They were 82 and 79, fragile and tired, but I needed them to face the truth. I laid it all out. The cremated ashes 20 miles away, the $200,000 they'd spent on a fantasy, the family members who'd fled to escape their delusion. For the first time in 40 years, I saw my parents truly see each other. Dad looked at Mom with such profound sadness. "Margaret," he whispered, "what have we done to our living daughter?" Mom's response broke my heart. "I know Emma wasn't real the way I made her. But Sarah, she felt so real to me. More real than than anything else in my life. Even more real than you sometimes." "That's the problem, Mom. I was your real daughter. I was here, breathing, growing, needing you. But you were so busy loving a ghost that you forgot to love the child standing right in front of you." Dad spoke through his tears. "We were so afraid of forgetting Emma that we forgot to remember you." 3 weeks later, we held a ceremony that should have happened 45 years ago. We went to St. Mary's Hospital Memorial Garden, where Emma's ashes had been scattered with dozens of other babies. For the first time, my parents properly grieved their stillborn daughter, not the fantasy 7-year-old who'd lived in their imagination, but the tiny baby who'd never taken a breath. Mom brought the last photo of Emily Morrison, the one she'd kept on her nightstand for decades. With shaking hands, she placed it on the memorial plaque. "I'm sorry, Emily," she whispered. "I'm sorry I stole your life to give to my baby. You deserved to be remembered as yourself, not as my Emma." Then we did something I'd waited 45 years for. We went home and packed up Emma's shrine room. Every toy, every piece of clothing, every fantasy artifact of a life that never was. Some things we donated, some we burned. The expensive wedding dress became a memorial donation to a program that provides burial clothes for stillborn babies. As we emptied that pink room, I watched my parents merely see me for the first time. Not as a replacement for Emma, not as a consolation prize, but as Sarah, their daughter. Their living, breathing, imperfect, wonderful daughter. My parents lived for 3 more years after that day. 3 years where they finally knew their living daughter. 3 years where my achievements were celebrated as Sarah's achievements, not measured against Emma's imaginary perfection. When Dad died, his last words to me were, "I'm proud of the woman you became, despite everything we put you through." When Mom followed 6 months later, she left me a letter. "Sarah, you were never second best. You were never a replacement. You were exactly who you were supposed to be. I'm sorry it took me 45 years to see that. Today, I'm 63 years old. Emma's room is now my art studio filled with paintings I create, books I write, life I live. The walls that once held photos of a fantasy child now hold my real accomplishments, my real relationships, my real joy." I visit St. Mary's Memorial Garden sometimes, not to mourn the sister I thought I had, but to remember the baby sister I actually lost. Emma Rose Mitchell, who lived for 7 months in my mother's womb and died without ever seeing sunlight. The cruelest irony. In trying to keep Emma alive, my parents had buried me. In finally letting Emma rest, they gave me permission to live. I spent 45 years competing with a ghost. Now I spend my days being grateful for breath, for heartbeat, for the simple miracle of being alive. Sometimes the most profound healing comes from the most devastating truth. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you knew to find everything you actually are. And sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone you love is to see them exactly as they are, not as who you wish they were, not as who you lost, but as the irreplaceable person standing right in front of you. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, know this: you are seen, you are valued, and your story matters. Share your truth in the comments below.